My name's Ade. When I was growing up, I was called Wale. My parents came across from Nigeria to the UK in the 60s to study. And when I was about 5, my parents went back to Lagos. And obviously I went with them. At 18, I became really restless. I wanted to go back to where I was born. It became pretty much an obsession. Wherever I went, I would see messages or signs about London. There were a lot of programs on television, and I started to have this picture of me going back. At 17, without telling my parents, I'd gone to the British High Commission to get my passport, hoping that one day they'll eventually allow me to travel. At 18, nothing was happening. I wasn't doing that well at school. I hadn't been able to get into university. I kept on failing my exams. I saw this as a sign that I was meant to travel. Things were not going that great for me in Nigeria, so I had to go back to where I was born. It was pretty simple. But my parents were not having any of it, particularly my mother. You see, I'm her only child, and she was determined to keep me very close by. At 19, I was still failing exams. I was very much into the church, and so my prayer every Sunday was, please God, please God, let me travel. And from time to time, the pastor would talk about fortune, and I'd see that as a sign that he was definitely speaking to me. My fortune was across the sea. You know, just like my parents had traveled, I was meant to travel. And I'd go back to my parents. Mom, please let me travel. It's not working here. You know, I can't get into university, please. No, you're not going anywhere. So one day, I was talking to a friend of mine, telling him about how bad things were and the fact that I wasn't going anywhere, and really miserable. This friend lived a few streets away from us, and from time to time he would see my mom. And so he said, well, you know, your mom seems to be really well-to-do. She's always wearing these jewelry, so you have a passport, so just get some of the jewelry and I'll sell it and you'll be able to travel. She did have a lot of jewelry, but you see, I was very much into the church, and good boys don't do such things. Or do they? Things were not working for me, I was still at home. So one day, Mom had gone to work, so had Dad. And obviously, since I was failing exams, I was at home. I went into her bedroom, and there were these huge trunk boxes that she had brought from the UK when she had left in the 60s. I knew where the keys were, so I got the key, opened up the trunk boxes, got out the jewelry box. It was cream, and it had a little ballerina in the open glass round. The box was filled with trinkets. I know good boys don't do this, but I was desperate. So I took some. There were pairs, so I made sure I took one pair. I wanted to make it look like nothing was missing. So I took some pairs and put them away, put the jewelry box back in, locked the box, took the jewelry, and that night I went to see my friend. I gave them to him, and he told me to come back the next day. I went back home. Mother hadn't noticed. She very rarely went into the box because she wasn't really into parties, so I felt pretty safe. Next day I went to see my friend. He had a look on his face, looking really, really sad. What's the matter? He told me that the person he had given the jewelry to had run off with half the money. And so he didn't have enough. What he gave me was not going to buy a ticket. So I went back home, sad, worried that eventually my mother would check the trunk box and see that her jewelry was gone. But I had this money. It wasn't enough to do anything with. So I thought, well, they're going to kill me when they find out anyway. So I might as well, do something good with it. At the time, my parents very rarely bought me clothes I liked. So I went out to buy some clothes. I didn't just buy clothes in a store. I actually had clothes made. 3 pairs of trousers, 3 shirts. And whenever my mom would see me wearing them, she'd say, "Oh, is that new?" "Yes, it is, my pocket money." "Oh, okay. Oh, you've been saving. Oh, good boy." You see, I was a good boy. But I was very nervous about that trunk box. I knew that eventually my mother would look in there. And then out of nowhere, my parents said if I was to pass my exams, they would allow me to travel. So I had the exams coming up, I paid attention. Now the exam results were not going to be out for a while. So my father said I could travel, and on the condition that if I passed, I would come back to Nigeria to go back to university. Of course. Yeah, of course I'll come back, I said. So, plan was in motion. I travel, mother doesn't discover the jewelry, and everything's okay. But I thought I was going to be traveling next week. It was 3 months down the line, and I had to wait and wait. As the days rolled on, I heard my mom say she had a party to go to. And I knew that she was going to be checking that box. I was truly going to die. I went back to church and prayed, "Please God, please, I need a miracle. A miracle, please." The party turned out to be about 4 days after I was going to travel. And I kept on praying that mother does not check that jewelry box. The day eventually arrived, had my ticket in hand, my parents came to the airport with me. As my mother waved me goodbye, she told me to be a good boy in London. My father told me to pay attention to my studies. I could not wait to get into the plane. My secret had not been discovered. What a relief. I made sure I had a window seat as I sat on the plane, just to make sure that I was definitely leaving the country. A few weeks after getting to London, I got a letter from my mother. She told me she'd been looking for her jewelry and couldn't find, certain bracelets and trinkets, and wanted to know whether I knew what had happened to them. I wrote back. I was obviously liberated. So I wrote back saying I was very unhappy when I was living in Lagos, so I took the jewelry. Posted the letter. A few weeks later, I got a letter from her, which I have here. "Wale, yours was received today, and I have to give you an urgent reply. Before I continue, please write to your daddy and apologize to him about the trinket, because he found your letter inside my bag. He was looking for a biro, and then he found it. I know this is the work of Satan, but Wale, you really disappointed me because you allowed Satan to come into your life. I always warned you about the friends that you keep. I beg you in the name of God, don't keep any bad friends in London. Prove to your daddy that you're a good boy. Don't learn how to drive yet, I beg you. About my bracelet, there is not much to say. It is your property in future. I have forgiven you. but I pray that God will forgive you too. You should pray and ask for forgiveness in Psalm 51. The only option I have for you about the gold is that you have to work hard and buy me a new one. Enter any jewelers and let them know the price. You just have to buy me another one. You know, things are not that easy in Nigeria. Please take care of yourself and forget about the bracelet. But you must buy me another one. It is 18 karat gold with 10 bars. Concerning your school exams, focus on your books. Please go to the library and read your books. I read the letter, put it away. And the next day, I got another letter. Hello, Wale. I just have to write you another letter because I am really disturbed. Each time I remember the bracelet, it makes me really miserable. The letter went on. It was pretty much the same thing. But I wasn't in the country, and so I was relieved. 6 days later, I got a letter from my father. My exam results had come out, and I had passed. And so he was writing to tell me about that. I have to inform you that I've received your exam results and that you passed. The results have been posted to you. You now have to decide what you are going to do. I have to tell you my mind about your mother's bracelet. I would not imagine that you would do such a thing, and I must confess that you have really disappointed me. Regarding your exam results, what are you going to do? I want you to return home to Nigeria. I folded the letter and in fact threw it away. I didn't return to Nigeria. That summer, my father visited London. We never talked about the bracelet. The year after, my mother visited London. We also never talked about the bracelet. 8 years later, when my mother visited London, I eventually came out to her as gay, explaining that my desperation for wanting to leave was because I knew I couldn't be a gay man in Nigeria.